One of what you bring lunch and a buffer also. Lunch is a brown.
Awesome. We'll start?
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. I had to check where it was just on the borderline of the AM PM shift. I'm Anand Bagmar. I work with ThoughtWorks. I'm currently the test practice lead at ThoughtWorks. But more important that I think I'm a quality evangelist. I deeply believe the product should be of good quality. What does it really mean? For whom is it of good quality? Is it for the tester? Is it for the developer, the product owner, business owner, or is it for the end customer? I think it's really a combination of everything. So I've been doing testing since about 15, 16 years now, in the industry about 18, 20 years. And my moment of truth or self-realization came when I was working for Borderland Software as a support engineer. We had to interact with customers. We had to interact with the development and testing team, being that interface to reduce the anger that the customers have when things don't go wrong or don't go right, and the delusional world that developers, the engineering team lives in, that this is what I need to do. I don't care what the end user is using it, I'm going to do it this way. Good, bad reasons, but that was a long time ago. But that's where I really understood and realized how important the product should be, the quality of the product should be, how the end user is going to use it, how we can reduce that pain. That said, enough about myself. This is about you and what you want to get out of this session. So one of the things we already heard that if we can cover some aspect of distributed testing, how automation fits in and how can we scale those kind of things. Very interesting discussions earlier in the morning about how teams should really be organized, what is the attitude required on the, from the team members to really make it work. What do you think this session is about? What do you expect from this session? No expectation?
One is that we know, we understand that how deployment frequency and sprint frequency can be synchronized. If we can't deploy per sprint, so how to fit the hardening kind of thing where we are not putting some potentially adding value to the product, but fixing defects only.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of teams are doing defect fix iterations where they don't do anything else than fixing defects.
Mm-hmm.
So what should be the best way of managing such kind of projects, like where we balance?
Yeah. Very good question, and we'll cover that aspect about the deployment aspect for it.
Also, I feel that some part of it, the testing is overhead. Basically, the same thing. What I mean is, same thing is tested again, and again, till it goes to the final product. So, is there any waste that we can eliminate there?
Okay. Very good question and insight for that part. It's not just a question. I'm sure you've thought more about this for a long time. How can you reduce waste? That is more generic. But how can you avoid that repetition also of that sorts? How can you make it more effective? And we'll be covering some aspects of it for sure. If anything gets left out, I think the parking lot is a great way to address those questions, and we'll take it during lunch, in the panel discussion and beyond also. Yeah.
In the waterfall, we have what we call a unit testing, system testing, integration testing, and what do we have in Agile?
Okay. How do different types of automation testing of sorts? You're talking more automation specific or just general types of testing?
In general.
Okay. How do general types of testing map from waterfall to Agile? I don't think really there's any difference in the methodology. It's a type of testing that's important, but we'll be covering that also in some ways.
Another thing is the feeling is like the Agile team should have more testers. I mean, the developer-tester ratio should be, testers in waterfall we can get away with this number of testers.
So that's a completely different long discussion itself, but it's a very important aspect. That's not something that we are covering in this session, but very quickly in one line I'll address that it's about what is important to be done for the product. And if one person or one role can do it, you don't really need to create roles to get that role done. Important thing is, are you building the quality in? What Agile says, there are a lot of principles, the manifesto says something which as a result come up with a lot of more principles and practices to achieve those. One of the biggest thing about Agile is the way Agile teams work is, can you build the quality in the product and validate that? It's more about defect prevention than defect detection. So if developers who are writing code, they itself follow the right practices to prevent the defects coming in, you don't need anyone different to be testing.
But that is true for waterfall also.
True, but there is more emphasis in the way of working in Agile teams, probably Scrum also. I have not worked a lot in Scrum, but the practices help achieve that. But anyway, that's a separate discussion. As we said, maybe we could add it to the parking lot and we can take it up separately.
One more expectation was that I have seen a lot of trainings nowadays that agile testing and all. So I mean, the testing is testing, what is agile? So the expectation is to know that when they do the training on agile testing, what different magic they should do.
Okay, so again, that's not 100% mapped to what we are going to be talking about. It's just a thought process that is different than anything else. You are working in very quick iterations. You need to be doing a lot of things every time. Doesn't mean you're testing the same thing, but you're doing a lot of activities in that very compressed time period.
Yes.
That is the fundamental difference in agile testing versus waterfall testing, if you can really classify it that way also.
So I have never been a tester by designation. So just expecting some challenges that testers face.
Yeah, and we'll cover some of those. So let's get into the core thing, what we are going to talk about. A lot of these expectations we'll be covering in some way or the other. Whatever is not covered, I request we have offline conversations and we can address that. And there are a lot of us who can contribute to those discussions. It's not just me. We can have great discussions around that. So the main point which we are trying to address over here is, what are the criteria for determining your product is ready to go to the next level? Next level could be as easy, as simple as developer is writing some code. Before he or she commits code into some subversion system, he wants to know if he can commit or not, if he's broken something. That's the first point where that person needs to know, is this code ready to get to the next stage of it. Once the code is committed into subversion, it's on some QA environment, let's say, and there could be various different types of QA environments because we are in a complex domain, complex ecosystem. There will be various types of environments. How do you know that that particular piece of code or combination of pieces of code is ready to get to the next level? Eventually, it will get into staging or pre-prod and then to production. That's a long way. But how can team members, how can managers know with a surety that yes, we are ready to go? So what are the parameters that you think you use to determine that? One obvious thing I'll say is the number of open defects. Right? What else? Sorry?
PO acceptance.
PO acceptance?
I would say the skill of the developer.
Okay.
If it is a senior guy.
In complex teams or large organizations, do you think that will be a measurable parameter in any way? Becomes difficult is rather.
Yeah, if I have a team of around 7-8 people.
Yeah.
Also, like we say that there are no severity 1, 2, and 3 defects are there.
So open defects, fixed defects, those kind of
And type of defects also.
Yeah.
In another environment, we have a kind of a sanity testing before developers can deliver the code.
Okay.
And that sanity testing is actually a set of existing test cases,
Mm-hmm.
which is actually related to code. Something called as code coverage.
Mhm.
They define and these are the things that might get affected these features because of this code. And we run that sanity, develop actually run that sanity and make it clean.
Okay.
And I think to add to it, like we have mentioned the integration phase where you have automated testing that runs and whatever the sign test cases are there are automated, then you tell there's some definition of the product.
Correct. Correct.
Yes, and compliance to it.
Yeah. All are correct things, definitely. As the organization grows, to measure these things becomes more complex. To add meaning to just how many defects did we fix, it's not just a number anymore, right? In small teams, with that number, you can add your knowledge about the team, how well you know the developer, senior or junior, or how flaky the system was, you can sort of make those judgment calls, that gut feel calls. The tester will always say, yes, I'm sure there's something missing out here, I want to do more testing, or I have not done enough testing for that matter, or this is good to go, I know that for sure. Gut feel doesn't work as the system scales. It may not work rather, right? Because there are just so many moving pieces over there. And that's where all combination of all these different techniques come together. There's a lot of data that we look at in terms of automation test coverage, whether it's coverage or whatever. A lot of dashboards in terms of defects, the trends, how many have been fixed, what are open, the severity, priority of those. Along with that, we need something more. If it's a small product, that might be sufficient. But what we are trying to look at now is what could be these other parameters where you can look at data, existing data, to help make that decision more data-based than more gut feel-based. Okay? What is the objective of any organization?
Earn money.
Make money, earn money. That's the first thing. But there's a component to that also. It's not just making money. You can make money only if, exactly, are you delivering value to whoever's going to use it, right? As you can see, that's part of the objective. What other objectives are there? How can you achieve these objectives? Customer satisfaction.
People, your resources.
So customer will be satisfied if they get the value and on time, right? They have to get the functionality on time. I cannot wait for 5 years to get some functionality out. And do you think if you're delivering value and it is on in good time, that is going to be sufficient?
Within the budget.
So money we already got earlier, right? So you have to make money and save money, whatever. Quality. That is the biggest thing. So these things in combination is what is going to deliver value for the organization, get value for the organization and for the customer also. Now to achieve these, there is, the reality today is organizations are split all across the world. I don't think the background images are very clear, but I hope we can see a world image in the background, right? So organizations are split across the globe, and that is for various reasons again. Globalization, the cost aspect of it, we want 24/7 operation, we want to keep running like a factory all the time. We want the team size is just too big to have under one roof or in one room. We have to split, whether it is split between two different rooms, 2 floors in the same building, different buildings, same city, or across continents, it doesn't matter. Teams are split because of the size. We have to make better at that. Mergers and acquisitions. We've been part of mergers acquisitions. We know about mergers acquisitions. The reality again, it's not an organic company culture anymore in that sense. Good and business reasons, you require to get into these kind of things. And of course, organizations get split up, go to different places because there's talent available everywhere. You have talented people all across. So, that said, let's get more on the technical side of things, the practice side of things. There are various practices and techniques we heard in the morning. We spoke also about a few. What is one of the practices that makes teams successful in this fast-moving world? Communication, that's one. Teamwork. Trust. What else?
Skills.
Skill, commitment, motivations.
Clarity and accountability.
Okay. That is also right. I'm looking for a specific one. You can keep going.
Common vision.
Common vision, okay. Collaboration, yes. But to make all of this happen, in order to achieve the organization objectives.
Interest, attitude.
Sorry?
Interest, common interest, attitude.
Okay, so the common vision and everything, probably it's related in some ways, right? So one of the practices to make all of this really successful for individuals, for the organization, for our customers, in order to get out in good, get the product out of good quality in good time, one of the practices is automation. Okay. If this is not there, then it is going to be painful to do. We need a longer stabilization period, a lot of manual or exploratory testing, whatever is required to make sure we are not just giving value to the customer, it's also of good quality, right? So one of the practices that really help, and I'm saying one of the practices. What all you said, that is very important for sure. But one of the practices we are going to focus on is test automation. There is also a practice which makes teams unsuccessful. Manual testing. Yes. Again, not the one I'm looking for. Automating everything.
Automation.
Okay. So I'll just reduce that a little bit. It's again test automation. How many of us in the room are come from a technical background of sorts, have been technical? Awesome. So can we relate all the people who raise their hands, especially all the people who raise their hands? Doesn't mean others cannot try and answer. Why can this practice be successful as well as unsuccessful at the same time?
Successful if you hit the right target.
In what way?
For instance, if you know what can be automated and you automate that. If you get into things which are unrealistic and like you will spend hours and hours and still you will not get.
So knowing what to automate is what you are saying. Okay. Identifying the right candidate. Fair.
And identifying the right time. Like, I have a relation example, like 8 to 9 years back, we started a project from scratch, and it was like, to automate on the very first day. So it was like, even if a search text box is there, you automate. So a lot of time was spent on rewriting the test. The framework was not in place, the version 1 was not in place. So it was like, we have to automate and get rid of the manual testing. So there a timing of automation.
So sort of ties into what you were saying, knowing what to automate and extending it when to automate that, right?
So one of the objectives automation has is the regression testing. So that you can do that. If you do too much of automation and it's not catching too many regression, it means you are actually losing on resources. So automation means that the background machine is running test cases automatically, right?
Okay.
So you lose on the resources also. If you
Hold that thought. That's a very provoking statement in various ways. How many of us think about automation as functional automation? At least a few of us think that way, right? So when anyone speaks about automation, the first thing comes to mind is functional automation, right? That is the first misconception or myth that is there. It cannot be just functional automation. That's one part. Second, how many of us think that automation should be done when the product is stable?
I used to think like that.
Okay. What has changed?
With agile perspective, we cannot wait till the end.
But then it gets into the problem what she was saying, right? That you build automation for something and it's going to change again and you spend so much time changing it again.
It's never guaranteed to be stable. Everything is going to be changed.
It is going to change, right?
I think that is the challenge we have.
So one of the, again, this is what I call the myth of automation again, that automation is going to, you can automate only when the product is stable and automation should catch regression issues. If the product is stable, you don't need automation. It has been validated in various different forms. Why do you need automation after that fact? You need automation to ensure when the product is changing, existing functionality should not get affected without the team knowing about it. Maybe it is expected to change, but the team should know immediately about it, right? Coming back, getting a focus back on this, why is it successful or unsuccessful? How many of us have heard test automation should be of production quality? Test code should be of production quality. Has anyone heard that? One? Test code should be of production quality. Test code. When you're implementing the test automation, it should be of the production quality.
because test has to go to a regression environment at the later stage and maybe at the life cycle of maybe 10 years or 15 years or maybe life cycle of the product actually. So if you release the release.
In fact, it's longer than the life cycle of the product in various ways, right?
Yes.
It will still be used. So you're writing code. The difference is, are you implementing functionality or are you implementing the validation of that functionality? It is still code. Whether you use record and playback tools or you build your own custom framework, it is still code. You have to make sure it is of production quality. And what do we mean by production quality? It is the quality of codes that devs would typically be writing to make sure they're using the right design patterns, the right practice, engineering practices to build a good, robust, reusable, maintainable code. Test code should also be like that, because if the tests have to keep on evolving with the product, it is going to undergo similar kind of transformation and evolution as the product code is. So you have to treat it with the same respect. The minute test automation is not given the same respect as product code, it starts going from successful practice to an unsuccessful practice. You'll end up with thousands and thousands of tests, or even 10 tests if you have automated. If that is not of the right quality, it will not give you feedback. The team is going to say, I don't care what feedback is coming in because it's going to be too delayed, it's going to be flaky tests, I have to do that manually anyway. I don't care about that, let me just execute these tests manually. So the practices is very important to follow correctly for automation to ensure it remains a successful practice and doesn't quickly cross the line and become an unsuccessful practice.
I think it will depend upon the automation framework than the test automation.
Absolutely. Framework is just code again, right?
Yes.
It is just code again. Yeah.
You talk about the functional automation. When we start thinking of automation, there's the functional
Yes.
automation that comes to the mind. My question is, when we are doing the right kind of coding, so probably following practices like TVD, so where we are, and even whether it's TVD or the right unit testing, if it is automated, so ground level testing is already done. So primarily when it comes to test automation from a tester standpoint, would it not be only the functional automation that we talk about?
Yes. But we are not talking about the tester's point of view only. We are talking about the product.
No, but the test automation. So are you considering the unit test also
Everything.
part of this?
Everything. That's why I'm not saying functional at any point in time or the tester at any point in time.
So what is other than functional that
We'll be talking about that. Okay? And that's where, so once we understand what are the practices that can make it successful or not, it's important to just quickly take a step back and understand what is really our test automation about. Why do you need it? You mentioned too much manual testing earlier, right? Why else do we need test automation?
reduce time?
Reduce time, which equates to get quick feedback, right?
Budget, the cost. After a certain point, if you do everything manually, it will add on to the budget. Whereas automation is a kind of one-time effort if it goes in right direction.
So again, the risk is what I mentioned earlier as part of one of the discussions we're having. It's not a silver bullet, right? But if done well, yes, very true, very true.
Sometimes you have to scale, like when we use JMeter and that,
Mhm.
manually it's not done.
So special type of testing where manual testing is not possible. You cannot achieve the same validation with manual testing easily at least, right?
Basically to increase the efficiency and productivity.
Exactly. So what does it do for your team? It increases efficiency, productivity. It gets quicker feedback back to the team. So what really is test automation in that sense then? It is a safety net for the team, right? Safety net, if you equate it as the image suggests, it's a fishing net of sorts. If you equate it with a net, if a fisherman is going to fish for specific, let's say, small fish, would he be carrying a net with a very large grid size, a very large mesh size? Of course not. The fish is just going to swim away. At the same time, if he's fishing for large type of fish, and if he takes a very coarse grain mesh size, will that work? He's going to catch a lot of unnecessary things also in that net, which is again noise or loss of productivity of sorts for him, right? So it's a safety net. The grid size is dependent on what exactly you need to do. You need to be able to catch the regression issues which are of importance. A fully automated suite, does it mean has got no defects in the product? Right? So it's about what is the kind of safety net that you have built for your product that will catch most issues as quickly as possible, at least the highest priority issues, highest severity issues. Right? That said, how many of us have heard about the test automation pyramid? Okay, let me quickly explain that to you. What the test automation pyramid says, so Mike Cohn introduced this concept in his book Succeeding with Agile a long time ago. I think, I don't remember the year. But Martin Fowler, one of the co-authors of the Agile Manifesto, he has explained it very nicely in his blog also. So if you want, you can just search Martin Fowler test automation pyramid. That will be the first link that comes up. He's explained it very well. What it says is the ideal test automation pyramid has got various different types of tests. These tests over here are just for representation, the type of test. It depends really on what is the product being tested, and some of these would be applicable or may not be applicable. Maybe you need a few more types of tests in this pyramid. But it says that there are various different types of tests that you can automate for your product. The base of the pyramid should have the maximum number of unit tests. The base indicates it's the widest area anyway, right? So the maximum number of tests that are automated should be unit tests. Unit tests essentially mean you are testing granular piece of code. Developers are testing granular methods, logic in the code without really caring how it is going to be used. Right? They would use stubs, mocks, whatever required, and they are writing a particular functionality. They write tests for it if they are following TDD, write the code required to make it pass, and they have thousands of these tests over a period of time. But that is closest to the code. Then you have integration tests where different classes start coming together. There might be component tests between unit and integration. If there is a UI component in the browser where a lot of JavaScript is there, there will be JavaScript test to validate that logic itself. View test to test the UI in very simple forms, regardless of how it's being used in the workflow. Just check error messages, for example, in various different combinations, what happens, those kind of things. Then if there is a web service layer, web services are essentially doing some business transactions in granular form in a non-UI way. You could write automation for that. And there's functional UI test also. On top of it all, because automation does not ever replace manual testing, there is an appropriate cloud of manual exploratory testing on top of this. This complete pyramid along with the cloud is what represents the quality of your product. Automation is not just this, it's all automation and manual testing combined is what reflects what is the health of your product. Now if we scale it up in complex environments, you could potentially have, oh, I've got a stubbed environment where all my integrations are stubbed out, other external systems are stubbed out. You could have an automation pyramid for that to say, okay, what type of testing makes sense for this type of environment, let me do that testing. You have a semi-integrated environment where I've got various other systems or products in my organization portfolio, maybe in form of batches or whatever else they might be interacting. That forms your next set of environment. You would have a similar type of pyramid for that environment. Of course, each type of test will be dependent on what can you really validate in that environment. And eventually, it's a fully integrated environment where you, again, certain of these things repeated. The intent the pyramid is sort of repeated is because you're trying to get the most value out of validating what is available in that environment in a phased fashion. In that case, a combination of all these pyramids together will give you a sense of quality of the overall product because it all complements each other, it's never supplement. Okay? What this does not really indicate very well is the triangle in the background, the inverted triangle, which is the impact of each test on the product under test. So a unit test, which is impacting a granular piece of the product code, maximum number of these tests when done in a granular fashion will cover a wide range of logic implementation of validation at the base of the pyramid. As you start going up the pyramid, so if we just talk about functional tests, they are minimum in number comparatively. But each of these tests should really be impacting or covering the wide breadth of the product. So from a functional automation perspective, if the testers are focused on just validating JavaScript messages or granular functionality without thinking about what is happening to the product as a whole, that is a big problem. Not saying that should not be done, but if that is the only thing that is done, that is a big problem. Because then you're not seeing how the product is going to be used by the end user. And that is going across all the impacted areas. The other aspect is the time, effort, and cost keeps increasing as you go from bottom of the pyramid to top of the pyramid. The unit tests, the developers can run on their machine without the code being checked into any repository. Feedback is instantaneous, least time. For a functional test, the product needs to be built, compiled, built together, deployed to certain environments, databases set up, integration points set up, and then by the time the tester gets to it, it might be the next day or whatever duration it might be. The time lost is tremendous. Developers have already moved on beyond that time to work on some other functionality. So feedback keeps on getting delayed. Okay? The effort required to build and maintain these environments to get the validation done keeps on increasing. As a result, cost also increases. Okay? The concept of a pyramid clear for everyone?
Yes.
The other aspect of it is till the view tests, these are all technology facing tests. What do we mean by that? So if it's a browser-based, web-based interface, for example, you are changing some radio button to a checkbox for some reason. There'll be stories in your sprint that are going to say, okay, change this radio button to a checkbox and these are the values that should be there in it. The story is played, the developers would, maybe there are no unit tests for it because it's just JavaScript changes for that matter. There might be some integration tests because checkboxes can have multiple values coming in, that kind of thing. But there will be JavaScript tests because that is what is going to render the view in the browser. So there will be tests at this level. The view test is just loading up that specific page in a browser to see if I'm actually seeing the checkbox with the correct options over there. These tests are all related with your specific set of stories. These are technology facing tests. The other side of it is the business facing test. Why is it important for the business, the product owners or the customers to see this change from a radio button to a checkbox? What value is it delivering to them? That is the business value that the testers need to validate. Or, sorry, that someone needs to validate. It doesn't matter if it's testers or whoever. But you start looking at it, I have validated the change is done. Now I need to validate that the end user is able to use that change in the intent, in the way it was supposed to be implemented. Is it really bringing the value out to the end user? And that's what we need to validate at the top layer. Okay? So there is a difference between technology facing and business facing tests. Now if you look at reality, there are two anti-patterns that come up. The first anti-pattern is called the ice cream cone effect, which says that there is an same triangle about the product under test, impact of each test on product under test, but the test pyramid now is inverted, where you've got maximum number of functional UI tests, fewer web services, much more fewer view tests, and almost no unit tests. How many of us can relate to this kind of a pyramid? What is the problem? We already spoke about some of the problems earlier, right? We've got so many tests, it takes such a long time to get feedback, and it is different because of different customizations, whatever, right? As in this one specific case. Whatever the scenario is, the problem is that if you have too many functional UI tests, the time for feedback is going to be tremendous, and as a result, the team loses confidence, and you still have a larger cloud of the manual exploratory testing because the confidence in that automation is gone.
Wait.
It takes too long to get the feedback. The test might be not updated to be in sync with the product. There might be just, if there are 1,000 tests, for example, for whatever reason, if even 100 are failing, to fix and maintain them is going to take a longer time. Because you have to wait for the product to be built and deployed till you see the feedback, and then you need to spend time on it to fix it. Analyze the results and fix it. Maybe it's not the test that is wrong or failing, it's a product, it's an actual regression, but you need to spend a lot more time to find that out.
And this is a very common anti-pattern that we have seen, that people are not writing the unit test case. Mainly developers do not write the unit test case unless some checks are in place. But that's so true because by the time we come to that testing, functional testing, and then we identify a problem,
yeah,
the time has passed already.
Exactly, it's too late.
This is something everyone can relate to. This is something we faced in
Yeah.
the initial years that
Exactly.
then we had to redo everything from the unit testing and PDD gradually, etc.
Yeah.
And it also involves larger audience. At unit test level, it's only the developer.
Exactly.
And then getting the feedback.
So the change over here, there might be 10 tests out of those 100 which are failing for one simple thing, which potentially could have been caught by the unit test, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything available equivalent of JUnit and NUnit in mainframe or
For mainframe, let's talk offline. It's a very specific thing. There are automation tools available, open source automation tools for that matter that I'm aware of. Let's just catch up separately if it's okay. So this is one of the anti-patterns. There's another anti-pattern, which I started calling the dual test pyramid anti-pattern. To make it funnier, I was thinking a dual personality anti-pattern of some sort. But what we mean by that is there are two pyramids. One is a developer's test pyramid and there's a QA team test pyramid. Again, the type of tests are just representational over here. Can anyone think why there would be two test pyramids?
The different people doing it.
Possibly it could be
Okay, different people, but sorry, can you expand a little more on that?
the developers, the person who is being developed, he cannot think of writing functional test cases. He just because he's just developing a unit of the thing, he's not developing the entire function. So he cannot think about the entire function, how it
Okay.
Reusability-
There's something more deeper than that though.
Reusability of the test cases written at unit test level cannot be utilized as functional. So
That's implementation detail.
Yes.
It's a
Yes.
phased approach which generally happens into this structure. Development and then testing.
It could be
No, not that.
extending his knowledge to be more from the psychological perspective. Developer thinks that yes, unit test, JavaScript, unit test, that's my area. And
Exactly.
that is
Getting
a-
very close. So what happens is, again, all the things that you mentioned, they are on track of sorts. But a bigger behavior or impact because of this, there is a divide. There's a divide, a psychological wall, or whatever wall you call, a physical separation for whatever reason, testing center of excellences or whatever, right? Or offshore testing, separate component, whatever the reason might be. It's again not physically where the QAs devs are located. Distribution is reality of the world. Okay? But what this divide really means is that there is no collaboration. There is no collaboration between the devs and QAs. As a result, what happens though?
It's a repetition. Half of the things are repeated. So some of the test scenarios could be technical, but most of the unit test scenarios are functional in nature, which developers are executing, and then the testing team is anyway doing mostly functional.
So you're saying in some ways it could be duplication, right? Some of the implementation might be duplicated in terms of the intent. Forget the technology stack or anything. For that matter, each of the type of test could be written in a different framework, different technology for various reasons, which is fine. You have to do what is the right thing for the product.
I think the understanding of the core requirement, functional requirement, that differs. And when the person has coded something, so as I said earlier, a person has coded something, he would have coded from a certain mindset, certain understanding. A tester is testing it, he would take it as a defect, the developer would say that this is not a defect.
Yeah. So that definitely happens, and even if with collaboration that would happen, but the point is collaboration is missing. Okay. So one of the impacts is what she mentioned about potential duplication of the intent is being validated. As a tester, as managers, probably we can live with duplication of tests. There's a bigger problem.
Rework happens because the way it has been implemented.
No, that's still, yes, but that's still a smaller problem relatively.
I think the wholesome picture is missing. Developers have only one.
What will happen because of that? One of the effects is duplication.
Focus is not there. It's like when both are one team, then they are thinking right and right product is coming up. But in this
So again,
case,
that collaboration aspect, right? So duplication is one of the things which results because of this. The other thing which is a bigger problem is potential missing of scenarios. Potential missing of test cases that should have been automated just because you're not collaborating. Maybe it's false assumptions, or maybe just because of not talking from technology and business side of things together, you're missing out on potential scenarios which are important to be automated. Now, as a tester, that is a bigger problem to me than duplication. Because that one scenario which got missed potentially has a large impact in some weird scenario.
And when we say the possibility of missing scenario, that is I think more important, and whether it should be automated or not, that is
Spot on, because this is not talking about whether manual testing is probably still a cloud on top of both of these, because as testers, they would still be validating the view tests and doing granular validations. From a functional perspective, also they are doing some manual validations, right? So that part is fine. It's identification of the scenarios that is a big problem. Okay? So, just a point to reflect for you all. Think about what does your test pyramid look like. Think about where would you like your test pyramid to, how would you like your test pyramid to look like in certain point of time, and find out ways where you can get better about it. Just another point about the test pyramid, the layers, so pyramid by definition is an equilateral triangle. It's again just representational. Depending on the product under test, you define the different types of tests possible on it. The ratios are no way defined what should be the ratio between functional UI and the unit test. In some cases, it might be 1:1000, in another case, it might be 100:500. It's fine, or 1:2 in that sense. It's fine, it depends on what is being tested and where does it make sense to test it most. The important aspect is, as a team, you collaborate, you think about what is the right candidate for automation. Devs are anyway going to do the automation at the unit level, the integration test level. from a technology perspective. From a functional perspective, when testers start thinking about it, they identify this is important to be automated. The next logical question is, where does it make sense to automate this? Can this be a JavaScript test? Can this be an integration test which will give quicker feedback to the team? It's not shoving responsibility off. The intent is, can the team get quick feedback from those tests whenever anything changes? And that is what will help define a good collaborative pyramid. Okay? Quickly moving on, continuous integration. Do we all know what continuous integration is? Yeah? So developers will pair, if they are following pair programming, they'll check in code in continuous integration server. There are various jobs configured. On every check-in or potential during some schedule, build would happen, test would run automatically, feedback comes. And deployed as well if you take it to the next level. Or there could be a separate job which is triggered manually for deployment, right? Which means that on some occasions you want to redeploy, you want to deploy the latest build at specific times. That is possible. And this thing keeps on repeating over and over again for every check-in. Now, to get a sense of quality, when this check-in happens, the CI tools, they give you some kind of, they provide an ability to provide some form of trending out of the box for you. At a specific job level, aggregation of jobs or creating groups in certain tools, maybe that is possible. And that would do an aggregation of jobs and it will give the results out in some visual form also. This is the kind of test that are running, how much time is taking, pass failure percentage, whatever plugins you use to configure those kind of reports. This typically works for smaller teams, where maybe I've got 3, 4, 5 teams sitting across wherever, doesn't matter, but they're using the same CI server. They're getting the results over there, and this aggregation is still possible for me to get some sense of trends and of quality, what is happening from an automation perspective. This is not from a manual perspective at all, right? How many of us work in small teams? What's your team?
Around 20 people.
That's a whole product team that you have? Okay. Lucky. Because then the complexities are much more reduced in that sense. But there is one person out of this room. How many teams do you typically work with in your product portfolio towards that common release goal? Some numbers. 40 to 100 teams, right?
Yeah.
Now, in our Pune office, we were running a project for, we are running a project for one of the companies in Europe, where at a peak, we were an agile team of 55 people. And ThoughtWorks, we believe a lot in the value automation provides to building quality in.
One team of 50 people.
No, they were split into smaller project teams, but this was one project team per se, right? They were delivering towards a common goal. So this team of 55, they had about 50 jobs configured in continuous integration server. We use Go in that case, but 50 jobs for various different types of tests, and they also had some performance tests automated and running as part of CI, deployment jobs, different environments. Overall, 50 jobs in CI. Think about aggregating those jobs and getting some meaningful results out of it. It's challenging. They were split into teams, about 5 teams at their peak, which is still probably less than 10% of what complexity you are saying. How will you get a sense of quality for such large kind of teams? If as a program manager or business owner or whoever needs to look at this product and say at any point in time, in real time, tell me what is the state of quality of my product right now, would it be possible? That's where the complexity really comes in, right? For larger teams, which is a reality in enterprises, it is very difficult, I'm not saying impossible, it is very difficult to get a sense of quality in real time at every time. Okay? So, what happens in that case is someone will tell each team, tell me how you're doing, and then some lucky person or set of people will try and collate all that information manually and pull up some report and say, here CEO or program manager, this is what the state is right now. Okay? And this again has to be repeated on a very, very frequent basis. Okay? So, how do you know in such cases if your product is ready to go to the next level? How do you really know without looking at someone having to manually create reports and get that information. The other aspect is, assume you've got really good automation coverage. Does it mean there are no defects in production? Not really. So you have to consolidate this data from automation results with your manual testing efforts of various different types again, and together that will give you a representation of what is going on. With that thought in mind, so this was all just creating a story to get to the main concept which I want to share with you. It's about test trend analyzing. Automation is a reality in organizations. You cannot be successful in your teams without having good automation. Mind you, I'm saying good automation, okay? And I'm saying all the different layers of that pyramid also to part of that. Now, if you have your proper automation done for the team, I built this open source product to start pulling in data from various different sources together, because 5 of the teams in, if I can pick onto your story of sorts, right? 40 teams, let's say 5 teams are using one CI server, 10 teams are using another CI server, for whatever logical reason that grouping is there. How can you pull in data from all automation, all automated tests into one common place without having to worry about if it's the same CI server or not, and start making meaning out of it? So I built this product keeping enterprises in mind to allow for teams, especially managers or leads managers, to get a sense of what kind of trends are going on from an automation perspective in your organization. Is the ROI of automation, not from the traditional definition of ROI, but is your ROI on automation really giving value? I'm spending, as a CEO, I'm investing so much in tools, technology, people to do automation. Are they even running the tests? What kind of feedback are we getting from the tests? Have we found any regression issues? Regression issues, if the test doesn't fail, doesn't mean the tests are bad. The test should fail when something actually is found in the product. Am I getting any sense of that? Can I make sense of the patterns out of these? How many of us do patterns or trending based on the results on the team? We do, right? And for obvious reasons, we want to say, okay, for example, the simplest of it, what's the rate of defect increase or reporting, for example, or the rate at which defects have been fixed. Defects is a bad thing to really talk about, because that means your practices itself, there might be some holes in that which allowed the defect to get in the first place. But that's a very good, important measure to know what is going on with your product. How can you create these trends in an automatic fashion based on automated test results? Because CI is going to be limited in that sense to know what is going on. The other aspect of this is at the team level, each individual team level, I could be using my CI tool, my CI server, to analyze more of the failures that are going on in the test. If I say that I have got 1,000 tests running, any type of test or combination of tests, and out of 1,000, 100 are failing for whatever reason, I need to be able, CI will just tell me, okay, 100 tests failed. It doesn't tell me which test failed unless I dig deeper into it and find out which job, what type of test, why it happened. What happens if you've got 2 release candidates, for example, and you want to compare those and see what might have been different in the failures? So if I've got 2 RC builds, I've run the test against it. In both cases, I've got 10% failures. How many of us can say with authority that 10% is the same test which failed in both cases? It is quite possible that some other test failed, some test passed, but the number is still the same. How do you really find out these differences? The only way today in CI is to go and dig into those individual results, get the numbers out, the actual failures out, compare it and see what was different. So there are 2 intents of this product. One is assist the teams in doing failure analysis and assist the teams in doing trend analysis. That's why it is test trend analyzer. So very quickly, I just want to share a few features that are built into this product. By no means is this a pitch for the product. It is important to understand the concept and what value it can potentially bring to teams.
Nothing harm if it is pitch also.
Well, I don't believe in selling a product. If it is valuable, if it's a value proposition, and that's why it's open source that I've made it, by all means you can use it and you can reach out to me for help. This is the sales pitch, but no, I don't want to get into that. Yeah. But it's more about the concept and the value it potentially brings to teams. That is what I really want to share. So the failure analysis aspect, so yeah.
And I'm not able to relate that we are talking about this automation.
Yeah.
But how it fits with the agile way of working and how this automation can be done in agile.
Yeah. So it's definitely not that how automation can be done in agile. This is not necessarily about agile also for that matter. The point is that in agile there is more emphasis on automation to build the quality in, to get fast feedback. Now, if you're running automation on even if you say you run the automation once every week, your sprint is 2 weeks, at the end of 2 weeks you want to do a showcase and maybe release to production also. You want to compare how was your quality of your product last release versus this release. How would you do that? With the increase in emphasis on automation, you're looking at that data in an automated fashion, represented visually, to help you make more meaningful decisions about it.
Yes, this will be relevant for workflow as well. Like
in many ways. Yes, in many ways. But again, it's not just about functional automation. That is the other core difference I want to point out.
But from functional automation perspective, let's say if you use anything like Fashion Function Tester or
Mhm.
Selenium or something,
Yeah.
in any case you have to do manual work, right? At least that's the
Mhm.
recording and manual work. So, is it good to have a separate team for that, or that should also be part of the team? And then
Okay. Again, something, if you don't mind, we'll park the question for now. Given that I've got less than 10 minutes remaining, I want to share some of the views that are possible, some of the potential features, and why this becomes a very powerful asset to the teams. Okay. But let's definitely catch up post the session and we can talk about it. So one of the views is failure analysis. If there are 100 tests failing, how does the team know which ones to fix first? So this one goes through the results based on different types of tests. It will just group it based on the test failures and say that in this case, 66% tests are failing for the same reason. If I fix this one failure first, 66% tests will start passing. The failing test will start passing. It helps the team prioritize what to do first compared based on the number of tests that have failed. This ties back to the practices required on building the automation. If you do not log proper messages in the failures, all failures can potentially be clubbed into one same generic message, as found true but was false, expected true but was false. That's a very generic message. So you need proper logging and error reporting to be able to use this thing. But if you build the automation in the correct way, this becomes a very good tool to say, with least effort, what's the maximum value I can get out of it.
Is it at all levels in the triangle?
All levels.
Or just
All levels. It's based on, so this is based on a specific run, which all tests ran on that particular run, analyze the results and see that. Okay. The next thing is what I spoke about earlier. 2 builds, same test ran, same failing percentage, but what has changed between them? So compare runs feature where you compare 2 specific builds, it will tell, okay, these tests pass in both, these tests failed in both. What is more interesting to me is to know which failed last time, which failed today. But even more important, which passed last time but failed today. That is where regressions are introduced. So it helps in that analysis for the team. The next thing is, how does my pyramid really look like? Again, based on a specific project, sub-project category, it's metadata, we won't get into those specific features. But for a particular project, how does my pyramid look like? This representation is just a representation. The value really comes out over here. I've got 7 functional tests which potentially take 4.2 minutes to run. I've got 105 unit tests which take 17 seconds to run, which is giving me faster feedback. Now this is for the actual, these numbers are for the TTA product itself. We used CI, we ran it on CI. These are numbers from TTA. These are type of tests that we have. But knowing the product, I might say, maybe I have got too many functional compared to unit because I know my product well. Maybe I should have more Java integration or JavaScript tests in between. Now I can start making meaning out of the data I see from the latest test execution to see what do I need to do from an automation focused perspective going forward. Failure analysis, yeah?
How do you decide the integrity of the numbers? I mean, you finish 7 functional tests. The tool cannot decide the coverage of those tests.
This is not coverage. This is based on numbers.
So if the coverage is not proper somewhere,
Yeah.
this result would not. I mean, once you create this tool, are you mapping it to stories and then moving
No.
it? It's
No.
just a sniffer.
Yes. So this is data points in real time and some visual form for team members to look at, put context to it, and get some more meaningful information out of it. This is no way a soothsayer of sorts to say that this is what you should do. No. This is what you have currently. In an automated fashion, I'm just presenting it to you. You see what is important to be done. So on similar lines, right, you could map various different types of tests for your product. So now this one is a mapping for unit integration and functional for this particular project. You could say that this test is consistently at 100, but there are dips in between. And this is based on a date range that I've ran the test. Now I could very easily say that these are flaky tests, there are intermittent failures, when I run it again it works. But you can say it is failing at the same time every time. Each of these bubbles represent a specific run location based on time also, right? Why is it failing at that specific time in all cases? When you dig deeper, you might potentially realize, oh, maybe it's an integration point which goes down at that time in every case. That's why. So you can start making more meaning out of it. It helps you do root cause analysis without having to find a needle in the haystack. Okay? Similarly, you might say that this particular type of test, it's very flaky. Either the team is not right, the product is not right, technology is not right. There's some problem. As a manager or someone, I need to investigate more into this to find out the root cause, why these tests are so flaky. And I need to try and fix it over time. The other thing is functional performance benchmarking. When I'm running any type of test, to run performance tests for that matter, you need to have special builds, special environment, access lockdown in various different ways, and of course you have to wait for functionality to be implemented, integrated, stabilized in various ways before you run performance tests. Why wait till that time? From your test itself, any test that is running over a period of time, you can map the time it takes for that test to run for the time period. And if that test intent has not changed at all in that time period, why is the time so flaky? So if it is on the average between 10 to 35 seconds, if that is the general trend, why are there so many dips? So many dips means there's definitely some problem, some defect, it didn't proceed at that point. Why does it take such longer time in some cases? Again, you can make meaning out of regular test execution to try and find patterns and say, yes, we seem to be on track, or no, we need to investigate more into why it's going. Simple example I like to give, when you start building a web product which has login functionality, first test you automate is a login test, typically, right? Talking about functional side now for an example. As you keep on building the functionality, you would add more and more logic and validations to your JavaScript or whatever for login, right? Now, if you create a line chart for the login test, or you try to map the performance, the execution time for login test, if you see it increase slightly over a period of time, it might be in the right track. If you suddenly see it go from 5 seconds to 10 seconds, what happened? Did we change the authentication system, the protocol, or what happened over there? Again, you can investigate at a specific point in time or period of time to see what might have changed and try and do your RCA much more quickly, come up with a resolution much more quickly. In many cases, it might be, oh, I've added more validations, that's why it's taking more time, which is fine. Again, we are not telling what is right or wrong, we are just saying what as it is seen.
Can we see which test cases are from that? Can we see which test cases are taking more time?
This is for a specific test case.
For a specific.
This is for a specific test case. But to your question, just hold on to that question for 1 minute. We'll be getting to that part where I can talk about it. Last bit, what functionality exists is, this is not the source of truth. There's a lot of information in the requirements tracking tool, in the defect tracking tool, in your CI tools. We do not want to duplicate any of that. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we can easily embed those views inside TTA as a dashboard and make this as a central dashboard for everything. You can get your manual testing reports embedded over here and all those reports embedded over here. Likewise, in your other tools, if they provide embedding the TTA view, you can get this view inside over there also. So again, it's not about replacing any tool, it's trying to make the best of all these combinations, the resources that you have, so that the team can make better make better judgments about the product. There are various other features that I have in mind. I won't go through that in interest of time, but most importantly, how can you use TTA to see if it works? So this is open source, copyrighted by ThoughtWorks in that way. It's available on GitHub. It uses the Apache 2 license. To quickly try it out, download it, set it up, use it. There's a manual upload page where you can specify a lot of metadata information about the test execution and a zip file of where all the logs are. It currently supports JUnit type logs, NUnit type logs, Cucumber HTML reports, and we can add more report support if required. Once you validate that the log type is supported, the test execution outputs that your frameworks create supports it, then you can integrate it in an automated fashion. In that sense, what you have is automatic upload where you have CI integration. Some job is triggered where tests are executing, which typically mean that the tests run on some set of machines, which are configured with CI. What really happens in that CI is, when the job is triggered, command executes. Typical execution is you clean up the machine, you set it up, compile your code, set up your test infrastructure before you start running your test, and then the results go back to CI. That's how you would see pass, fail, and whatever analysis from CI. In case of TTA, when you use it, the only thing that changes is after the test run, you are seeing instead of directly going back to CI, send your results to TTA also, and then return to CI. So you still see all your artifacts in CI as before. The only difference is you're also sending the results to TTA. Now, what power does this bring to the team? To any team for that matter. As long as you're running tests on CI, it could be any CI that is triggering it. Go, Hudson, Jenkins, Bamboo, TeamCity, anything. Or your inbuilt CI tool if you have that. Your build tool, build files, how the command actually starts executing on a machine could be anything. And tables, Gradle, make, rake, MS build, MS test, whatever it might be. Your test implementation could be anything. Using any type of runner, XUnit, TestNG, any type of runner. It could be in any programming language your test might have been implemented. Java, Ruby, Python, Scala, anything. As long as the report artifacts are supported by TTA, it's just a matter of modifying your build file to send the results to TTA. That's about it. No one on your team really knows the difference, what is happening. They don't need to change their way of writing tests. As long as they're writing good tests with the correct error reporting, it should work fine. So it's a very decoupled way of integrating TTA with your existing systems. Last bit, how can you help? There are a bunch of features which I already have in mind how I want to integrate with this. If you choose to use this, or if you have any other thoughts, suggestions, what type of features will be valuable in a product like this, please share that with me. I'll be more than happy to help add it in the backlog, prioritize it appropriately, and this is my beach project of sorts. I'll do this on any time that I get available. I'll try and integrate it and build it as soon as possible. Even more important, so when you use and give feedback, it's an open source project. You can contribute to it, send pull requests, and I can integrate it directly. You don't have to wait for me to implement the features also. That is another way of using it. This is a Ruby on Rails project, and right now it uses MySQL database because it started off like that. It was simple to use, but plan is to keep that also as a portable layer of sorts, as a pluggable layer, because some organizations might want to use Oracle or SQL Server or NoSQL database, anything. The important thing is that you need to build the architecture in a way that it's going to scale. Now, if for a complex product, if there are going to be thousands of tests which are going to be sending results on every test execution, the database needs to scale. You need to be able to have the queries optimized in a way to get the results back as quickly as possible. So database also has to be in a better fashion in that sense, chosen wisely. But it's purely a ROR project, right? So with that, I'm done with my slide deck. I know we have a lot of questions which we parked. Please feel free to reach out to me post this session or afterwards also. I'm sure a lot of our colleagues will also be able to contribute on those. So I encourage you to participate in the panel discussion at the same time. And even after this conference, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is available. The email, Twitter is there. About me page has got more ways you can reach out to me. Thank you for this opportunity. Hope this shared a different concept. If I can quickly ask a last question about Do you think this is something that can be valuable? This concept is something that can be valuable in your organization? How many of you think yes or no?
Yeah, I think it will be valuable.
It's definitely valuable. The only thing is talking to the next stage. Teams are generally struggling in setting up a CI environment. So that's the scene that we see. But this implement is the way you are capturing is really well.
Thank you. But on that point, so if I have to build, so I've been doing test automation since long time now. The first thing I've learned doing when I start building any framework for any new project or product, the first simplest test that I write, I'll enable CI integration for that. Why? Because it helps set up the CI infrastructure the way the framework needs to be to support running tests, whether in headless mode, in parallel, whatever, right? First test I do, I'll do that. Second test I do, I'll run it in parallel with the first one, which makes sure my infrastructure is almost set up. Then I'll keep on evolving it to add more functionalities to it, right? Once that happens, that's the point to start integrating such a tool. You can start seeing trends over a period of time. How much have I invested over a period of time? Now, especially in distributed teams, where devs might be sitting in one location, testers in another location, not saying good or bad in any way, but in that kind of environment, you still need to pull in all that information together. And you can start building up the trend and analysis based on that. Again, we talk about transparency and trust. This is another mechanism to get all that data available to you, to everyone for that matter, and you can start making meaning out of it.
So actually, what happens is now the CI catching up and all. So CI and your deployment, these things are independent of agile and all these things, but these are what they on the forefront. But in our scenario of IT service where we run, so it all depends on the client side, the way the entire thing is set up. And what we have seen is now when we're teaching them, when we're going for agile, the first thing we talk about is setting up the CI environment, as we said.
Yeah.
But teams are really struggling because it all boils down to how much investment is coming from the client side. So that is where I said your concept is very good, but we have to, on our side of the world, we have to ensure that first we set up a CI.
Absolutely, very fair point, because for that matter, anyway, that's a separate discussion. I just want to highlight one other aspect of this, right? So you very nicely shared the Agile Manifesto, what in simple terms, what the manifesto really means. The way I look at it, these are the basic principles, founding principles on the way teams can work, organizations can work. To operationalize these principles, there are tons of practices that can be used in various different combinations to achieve these. The practices, automation being one of them, automation including CI being one of them, collaboration, various different practices. You wouldn't just pick and choose randomly. You wouldn't say this practice worked for me last time, I'm going to use it directly. You are going to put it in the right context for the new project, the new environment, the new stakeholders that you're interacting with, the new skill sets and capabilities that you have on the team, and then decide which of these practices will help me achieve the principles. So there is a difference between the principles and the practices. When practices are done for the sake of practices, they become ceremonies. So we spoke earlier also, right? The ceremony is what are we doing about the ceremony? We do go through the same ceremonies. Ceremonies, I would equate it with traditions. Traditions started, and at the risk of getting flogged over here, me being a very non-religious but atheist person, traditions started for a good reason. That time they were not thought of as traditions, they were practices, because they did something. Temples were built on top of hills because it gave some value, there was some deeper meaning to it. That value is lost, they became traditions. Same thing over here, practices, if not used in the right context, will become ceremonies. Let it be practices which help the team. Feel free to evolve those practices as the team changes, as the context changes. Because evolution is what is going to keep your team agile. It's what's going to make your team agile.
I think the biggest thing is like what works with one company which started in that field, right, from day one. So it's in the DNA. But rest of the organization, whether it's CL, CNC, ECS, I think all of the companies, they used to be in certain thought process, and now that is changing over time. There comes the struggle, and now it has to come from the top. Like in CSC now, it comes from like Rory's level, CEO, and now it is really coming way down, and that division, the head, and everybody
Yeah.
is in that mindset.
There has to be a starting point, there has to be a seed. Okay? And there's nothing wrong in being on the transformation journey. ThoughtWorks itself has gone on a long transformation journey for over 20 years. Right? I don't say that we are the best, because best means there is no scope for improvement.
But what's the office in Delhi?
Yes, in Gurgaon. Okay. So, in this forum again, standing over here, I don't want to talk about ThoughtWorks or TTA. I don't want to do a sales pitch in any way. But I'm just saying it's a journey. Feel free to evolve, learn, fail fast, right? That's what Agile says. Fail fast. If it's not working, evolve into better ways. Don't get stuck with the ceremonies. Do something that is going to be valuable for you and your team, and change it as often as you need.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much.